All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Product People. We are product management consultancy and community building. This series is about us helping the product community get more knowledge from product leaders like Rushil here tonight, who's leading consumer experience at Klarna. And without that much more intro, I'm going to hand it over to him to better explain what he does.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Rushil, Rushil Dave, to be exact. I work at Klarna in product management field, and I lead teams for consumer preferences, user account, consumer concept, etc. And we are basically very rapidly moving Klarna from historically transaction-centric company towards more consumer-facing product development company. It's gaining a lot of traction in recent years, this whole business model, and of course, Klarna as a company as well. I worked for Zalando before for 5.5 years in mobile apps and some other internal product space. And before that, I had my own startup in Helsinki. Yeah, it's great to be here, and I think you guys have probably have seen the topic, very dear to my heart, because I love product management and team building, and vision and strategy is very, very important. But let's talk about that when we start the presentation in like, I think, a couple of minutes.
I was talking on mute. If you feel like it, we can just dive into it. As we've announced to our community that we're starting at 6:30. And for those who come in later, they can just view this on YouTube from the beginning.
Great, awesome. Let me then share my screen.
Looking good.
Good, all right. So a little bit of background, why I chose this topic and how we are working in Klarna basically, and why this is very important for all the teams that are working in Klarna. In Klarna, we have this operating model, we call it, where accountability is within the team itself. Teams are driven very autonomously, so they have a complete autonomy to drive, to form their own vision and problem space, etc. Of course, they have to align with other teams as well, with their domains, we call it as well, business units, and ultimately companies' vision and objective as well. That's when team vision and strategy comes in play. And it's very, very important in a sense that when team has autonomy to drive their problem space, it's very important to make sure that you have a proper vision and a strategy to achieve that vision as well. Another important aspect is that the teams are divided in such a way that the leads of those teams, like we call it accountable leads, which are generally product managers, they are like the accountable CEOs of the team. So they run their teams along with the team members and other like engineering managers as a small company, as a small startup actually within Klarna. So we also take this very seriously, that each team should have a vision and strategy, just like any others, like company or a startup should have that. That would drive the team further. But of course, we work in the same company. We also have to align with other other teams' priorities and companies' objectives as well. So in that sense, there are some sections or some aspects that we have to tweak, and that's what becomes actually the team vision and strategy within Klarna. So of course, this is the Klarna context, but outside of any like Klarna as well, this topic is very important because I believe every product manager has a job to motivate and inspire their teams with great vision and strategy. It could be product vision and strategy, which comes very close. But of course, developing team vision and strategy is also very important in a way to align your product vision with company's objectives, with other teams' priorities as well. So this is what I'm going to talk about. Like, of course, if you have a feedback, let us please share with me after the presentation, and we can discuss any points that comes to your mind. Just a second. All right, now it's moving. So first of all, I think the very important question is, why do we need team vision and strategy? I touched upon a couple of points that it helps to motivate and inspire the team for sure. Of course, align teams and stakeholders on the problem space that your team is working on. But apart from that, it also helps the team to be guided with fundamentals and the vision. A lot of times it happens like you have a lot of problems to solve, and then you and your team is jumping from one problem to another problem and one solution to other solution without any proper kind of path. And this kind of vision and strategy could help the team with some fundamentals, the vision as well, and have a focus basically towards what you want to achieve and how you want to achieve that vision. In that sense, of course, it enables the team to achieve the goals and like measure their success as well with some KPIs. And more importantly, so keep up with any kind of discussions on conflicting priorities and concepts. It happens many times that a lot of times you end up into those discussions on conflicting priorities. But if you have a proper vision and you want to achieve and you have step-by-step strategy towards it, you can easily keep up with those discussions as well when you have this vision and strategy ready. And of course, without it, as I said, like it's very easy to jump from one idea to another, one hypothesis to another, and then go right into solution mode without seeing the bigger picture or the long time kind of objective. And this could be very harmful when you are building products for your consumers, and also harmful for the team in a way that they will get frustrated at times if they don't see a clear path and benefits or the impact of what you are doing, basically. So that's why it's very important, in my opinion, and it's very useful as well. I have seen from my experience that bringing clarity with team vision and strategies just like motivates and inspires the team and helps them to have a really clear kind of objective towards that vision. So what could be the structure for such team vision and strategy document, let's say? It's one of the structures. Of course, you can name some sections differently, etc. But there's like, I think this covers a lot of important points, and we are going to talk about each one of them quickly. And then there are some tips and tricks. Of course, I'll share this presentation with you as well, the link of the presentation, so you can refer to it afterwards as well. But from the structure point of view, there are two sections that should be very much focused on the vision or the long-term kind of vision that your team needs to achieve. One definitely important, like very important aspect is, of course, the vision and the mission statement. Um, and we are going to talk about it. And of course, another thing is imaginary press release. I think this concept comes from Amazon, and it's very powerful communication tool to quickly communicate what you are doing. I mean, what your team is doing, etc. In the long term. So keep these two sections like for long-term kind of vision, and it could be from 12 to 18 months in future, basically. Uh, Next section is about the strategy itself, how you are going to achieve that particular vision. The background and purpose is another very important aspect. It sets the tone. We are going to talk about it as well. Problem space and scope. Yes, rather than jumping directly into solution mode or anything, always, of course, discover what problems are you trying to solve. What kind of scope would you have for your problem space? Because it could be that you can solve everything, but of course your team has limited capacity. So you have to make sure that you have a focused problem space and the scope that you can really achieve in reality. And then guiding principles, you may call it core values as well of your team. That is also part of this because it helps you and your team in almost day-to-day life to have some difficult discussions and alignments as well. So this is part of the strategy section, which could be a very mid to long term in future. So 6 to 12 months in future, you can plan this. And then the last one is the milestones. This is actually execution of the strategy. How would you execute the strategy that you have, what you have discovered in problem space, and what is within your scope as well. So plan the goals and KPIs. Some may call it OKRs, and of course, then have a roadmap with milestones and timelines as well that you want to achieve. And this should be very short to mid-term. If you plan it really long-term, it just doesn't hold true because of course, agile team practices that most of the companies follow and the uncertainties you may also have. Right. So I think if we talk about the process itself, like how you can actually start working on the team vision and strategy, always set a long-term vision. Don't just think about next 2 months, 4 months, etc. Set a long-term vision, see through the future, and make sure that you really like put proper kind of thought process into that, and what your product will be in future, and why we are doing something that we are doing, basically. Reasoning is another important aspect here. Involve your team. Without the team, you cannot really build a proper vision and get a buy-in from the team afterwards. You should always like involve the team right from the beginning. Spend time with your customers. You're all product management enthusiasts. I don't have to tell you how important customers are. It could be end customers, internal customers, merchants, partners. But if you are doing product, if you are developing product, you should have customers, and then of course talk to them as well, who they are, find out who they are, what they value, how you can help them. And ensuring alignment with your stakeholders, get buy-ins from different parties within the company, even outside the company if needed, is very important. And this actually feedback should be regular feedback. It's not a one-time thing. And as said, like this whole exercise or the doc or the tool itself is not a static document. It's a living document. You have to keep it alive. You have to revise it from time to time. And you need to make sure that all the changes that are happening around, sit down every 3 months, read it again, change things that you need to change, again, align with your team, get a buy-in from the stakeholders. If you need to do If you need to get to know your customers again, just do that as well. And that process continues. So I just put this through in a kind of a small process chart. The same things that I said. Know your customers, target audience, get to know the history, align with your team, gather their feedback, identify problems, cluster them, and then find a high-level way forward. From my experience, I think off-site kind of setting with your team helps a lot here. For example, I went with my team, one of my teams, to do this whole offsite where we actually, where of course we had research and discoveries done before, but then we would identify all the problems, cluster them, then of course discuss kind of high-level strategy to way forward, or the way forward as well, and then we would have a rough kind of vision, mission, etc. And then I would work on it from product perspective, get back to them, align with them again. Then of course, when you have that, those kind of the document ready, even if it's not perfect, I sent it to the stakeholders, to other teams as well, which are very closely working with us, and even to the management to get their opinion and feedback, and then improve upon it. So this kind of feedback loop is absolutely necessary here. You alone cannot work on the vision. You always have to get buy-in. You also always have to get the team's help and align with the stakeholders as well. So that's a very important aspect. All right. So let's talk about each and every section in a very basically, I just wanted to give some tips and tricks. This is totally up to you to build this kind of a document or tool for your team and for your actually clarity and focus as well. Yeah, let's talk about each section, how we can really form the sections and why is it important, basically. Imaginary press release. As I said, this concept comes from Amazon mainly, but a lot of companies are using this nowadays. And this gives you and your team, as well as the audience, extreme clarity on what you are doing, why you are doing it, and of course, how you can help your customers. It's very a powerful communication tool in a way that within 2-3 minutes, generally press releases are not more than 1 or 1.5 pages. So in 2-3 minutes of reading, your audience would know what your problem space is about, why are you doing something that you are doing, and how that helps customers, what impact you have within the company on your customers as well. One tip from my side is that always start through rough press release. Let's say when you are having sessions with your team and with your stakeholders or with your customers as well, start jotting down different points, work on the vision, strategy, and other sections, and then at the end come back to this section to really formalize it. Because from the beginning, you won't get really concrete ideas or concrete press releases that you can write, and things will change as you work on other sections, and then of course come back to this to formalize it, write it in a very concrete way to reflect all the points that you have gathered within the process. I have just put down a recommendation for structure, how you can structure your press release. So you can have a look into it. I think important aspect is that you touch upon each and every kind of points that you have gathered within this vision and strategy exercise, and put them together and close it with a call to action as well. Always mention how you get started and the customer impact. Those things are very important as well. But you can have a look afterwards as well. Vision and mission. Very difficult to get it right in teams where your problem space is complex and right deep into companies into a company's kind of problem space or objectives as well. But it's very like it's worth to spend time on it to get it right as well. And I would just say, like, when you develop a vision statement, I am repeating here, but a long-term objective is always necessary there. Uh, Vision is actually a long-term objective, so short-term wouldn't suffice. It should represent team's core essence as well. What is why your team exists? What is it doing exactly? It must be purposeful and impactful. Purpose is something that vision could really touch upon, and what kind of impact it would create. It doesn't have to be really, really concrete. In a way, you can keep it on a high level as well. I'll give you an example afterwards. Uh, and then, of course, try to make it customer centric. It may always not be possible to make it customer centric because sometimes some problem spaces are very close to the business as well. But you would always have some kind of customers or some kind of a business impact that you can create. And it's always good to mention that within the vision statement. And the mission is something that would be the approach to achieve that vision. It should be very clear and concise, continuous as well, if you can write it that way. And another extra tip is always write it in a collective, action-driven manner. You are doing this for your team. So you should always like write it in a collective manner that we are gonna do something about that. We are gonna achieve this vision by doing this as a mission. So this is very helpful in that sense to inspire the team as well. A tip here that sometimes you can, of course, combine vision and mission statements into one. A lot of companies or teams do that in a way that mission statement could just also include the vision, long-term vision as well. It's up to you how you want to do that. An example here, I mean, these are two statements, like vision and mission statements from Klarna team, which is dealing a lot with consumer concept and consumer data management within Klarna. And it's one of the core teams, basically, that helps many different teams within Klarna and, of course, the customers or consumers as well. So the vision statement could go like this, that provide a consistent consumer concept and interfaces for consumer data management to Klarna teams to help them build world-class consumer-facing products. Now, if you break it down, there are some points I would like to touch upon that we have to mention very clearly that what data management. If I have skipped consumer word like before data management, it would not be really helpful, but be multiple sets of data. But here we are talking about consumer data management. We are talking about consistent consumer concept. If you have multiple consumer concepts, then also we are not talking about this particular team's vision, but we are mixing up things as well. And from the impact perspective, as I said, like you can have a really like long-term impact and quite high level as well, that we want to build world-class consumer-facing products. From the mission perspective, to achieve this vision, what are we gonna do? Collectively, action-driven, we drive consumer-facing consumer concept at Klarna, manage core consumer details, and support Klarna teams to maintain consumer data in a secure, purposeful, and cost-efficient manner. So it covers a lot of different aspects in a way, but that is kind of the way to achieve that vision. And it's clear, it's concise in a way, still touches different aspects, and it's action driven. That what are we gonna do actually to achieve that vision? Next up is background and purpose. It's very I think this again, this is the question regarding the existence of the team. Why do we exist? And this section helps to set the tone of teams' problem space and strategy, but more so, it explains the reasoning behind teams' existence. and impact it has on a company's vision and strategy. Uh, this is something like it's very helpful for the audience and for your team as well. There are many like new team members joining your team, and a lot of them lack the background or the history of the team. And this kind of section could clarify that to them and to the audience as well, and how your team fits into the organization and in the company, or company's vision, strategy, objectives, etc., is also something that you can clarify in this section. It makes the audience understand the history, of course, and also the challenges that team is facing, and why. This basically to set set the tone for the next section, that is problem space itself. It's very important that your team, your audience basically would understand the challenges as well, the problems in a way very clearly. I've gathered some questions that you could answer to basically structure this section. Very much so like what I told you already, that why your team exists, how does it create impact and fit into the organization, and what would happen if team doesn't exist. Any legacy challenges, problems your team inherited, basically giving all kind of historical aspects and setting the purpose as well for the team within this section. Problem spaces and scope. As I told you earlier as well, one of the most important sections, one of the most important parts as well as of the team strategy, vision and strategy. In this section, you can clearly describe what consumer problems your team is or will be solving in future, and how. You don't have to go really deep into the solution space, but at least it's worth to mention high-level solutions that you are thinking about to solve those problems as well. Why is it important? This section really provides a clear focus and way forward. I touched upon this point that you and your team may have a lot of different problems to solve, and you cannot solve all the problems. You really have to prioritize and focus on solving the problems that are important for your customers, for your problem space, for your business. So this section could really state those important problems, cluster them, and then provide a way forward. And of course, the clear focus comes along as an advantage with that as well. Another important aspect is the scoping. Scope just provides focus as well, but more importantly, it provides a way not to have an overlap with other teams and problem spaces. A lot of times in big companies or even in small startups, it happens that problem spaces are so closely tied to each other that some teams might be working on the same problems, and that's just not worth it. I mean, it's not really impactful, and when you discover it, you may just end up into frustrating situations. Of course, if you have decided categorically to find the best solution for different, for the same problem, that's totally fine. But unknowingly, if some teams are doing that, that's not really useful. So then the scoping of the problem space is very handy in that sense, that when you align this team strategy and vision with other teams which are closely working with you, they will also have some clarity, and they will also then think about this from their perspective as well. And ultimately, this section helps you to discover or identify the challenges to overcome to deliver your team's vision. Ultimately, that should be also stated in this section. the risks basically that you have, or the support that you need as well, could also be stated here. Could be helpful, especially when you are aligning with leadership. They could have a good idea about any challenges and risks and support that you might need. So again, I have a recommendation for the structure, for the problem space and scope as well. You can start with the overview on a high level, what your team does and what kind of customer business problems does it solve or would it solve. And then you can expand on problem spaces by introducing, defining it, what exact problems will be solved within this space, and then some high level solution specific points, and then this scoping discussion. What is in scope, and also very important, what is out of scope. This can also help you to get like the clarity and expectation management with other teams and with the leadership as well, in a way that if someone thinks that should be in scope and then you have put out of scope, you can of course have that discussion and probably ask for more capacity as well. So that can bring good clarity on the problem space. And then, of course, you can repeat that for other problem spaces as well that you or your team may own. All right, guiding principles. Some people also call it core values. I think in Google they call it core values. So each team develops this core values first, and then they work it out towards the vision and mission and the objectives as well. Up to you how you want to start it. Of course, I would also recommend to do it with your team in the beginning as well, because this actually provides a good backing to the vision and mission that you will have for your team, since it captures the core essence, the core values of your team as well. These principles, the guiding principles, they help a team to guide them in their conflicting situations and difficult discussions. I can just give you an example. One of the teams we have in Klarna is, as I said, this which owns the consumer concept and consumer data management. But we have a lot of consumer data that we store, like their preferences as well. So is it our team that needs to store everything? That just may slow down the development, and that may end up into also security situations. So kind of a distributed model with a proper concept is necessary there. Then we developed a guiding principle that our team doesn't own all the personal data. And then we would explain it that, okay, which data we should own, we have clustered them out, which data other teams could own, and how they can really connect it to the consumer concept we have with some identifiers, etc., etc. And then, of course, how all of Klarna teams, which needs access to this data in a proper user-based access role management, can consume this data as well. So this kind of principles are important for some teams where they would get questions almost every day or every week that, hey, we want to store this data, or we want to use this data. In this kind of situations and discussions, these principles can really guide your team. You don't have to be present as a lead or product manager of the team, but teams know already that, hey, we have decided this as our guiding principle, and this has been agreed upon. Let's just answer our stakeholders with a very clear kind of expectations that they should have. And of course, on the other hand, this kind of principles or core values help to align team strategy going forward with other teams as well. So problem space and scope is one aspect of it. Guiding principles is another aspect, especially when you have competing concepts. Like if one team is working on one concept and other team is working on a very similar concept, it may happen that you have conflicts when you are designing the solution. And at that time, this kind of principles can help align teams' core values or what team is doing with the other team as well, especially when you are working very closely with other teams' problem spaces. One tip is that when you write these principles, don't just write a title, just explain these principles well. I'll give you an example afterwards, but like have reasonings behind, have a clear reasoning behind those principles and any kind of side effect or implications that may arise from this as well. Have that clarity as well. So I've taken an example from Whole Foods, and I just built a principle like on my own, like one of the principles. So I have attached a link at the end, which describes like companies' core values for different companies. I just like got some example from Whole Foods and then expanded it into this principle. So as you can see here, like the value, one of the value is like we care about communities and the environment. So we serve, support a local experience for our consumers as well as surprise in the most sustainable way possible. And what is the reasoning behind it then? The unique character of each store is a direct reflection of communities, people, culture, and cuisine. How this could help Whole Foods? So a lot of times it could be that when they are opening a store, they may just dump a lot of items from from their store, from their warehouses. But here they are saying something different. They are like, no, we should not do that. We should always serve and support local experience. So basically get suppliers from that particular region and support communities as well in that sense. What could be the implication? Then of course they need to build local supply chain network and partnerships when they want to open a new store in a new area, basically. And that's the risk they are willing to take to have this kind of a core value. Of course, you can expand it further to have even kind of business and other kind of benefits attached to this. And you can make it very like clear to your readers as well. KPIs. We are moving towards the milestones or kind of the objectives. I mean, I think I'll cover the sections quickly, the role KPIs and roadmap, because I mean, you guys are all familiar with that in one or the other way. But just some important points. KPIs should be designed in a short to mid-term. Generally, you should have those mid-term goals up to 6 months. And KPIs should be measured, like it should be measured with the KPIs regularly. I would even suggest to build dashboards if possible, and have like look at it with your team, like make sure that your team also looks at it and knows about that. Just don't keep it to yourself. But when you design KPIs, again, explain it, have a proper definition and targets attached to those KPIs as well. Just KPIs wouldn't make a lot of sense unless and until you have targets attached to it as well. The goals, of course, attached to it as well. I'm sure you have heard about smart KPIs, but like make sure that your KPIs are specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time framed. Another important aspect is get quality data to measure the KPIs correctly, because if you don't have a quality data, you are not measuring your KPIs correctly, and then you are basing your decisions on some wrong data set. And that is very harmful, not just to you and your team, but for the business as well. I just attached an example here from Zalando. We had once a KPI to increase app stickiness. Now, if we would just say this to other teams, they would not understand what does stickiness mean. So it's always good to explain, like, what does that mean? So that's the ratio between daily active users to monthly active users. And the higher the ratio, it's like higher the engagement you have in the app. So this is something I would suggest you should also do when you design your KPIs. Have explanation, have proper definition, make sure that your readers really understand what you are trying to measure, why you are trying to measure something, and what is the measure of success, like target, in other words. Roadmaps. Um, I mean, I think we all know about roadmaps, but very interesting aspect is that always build concrete roadmaps for 1 to 2 months and keep it open afterwards. Due to high degree of uncertainty, I just can give you an example. Like we just had this Corona situation, which came really quickly. A lot of people had to change their roadmaps, their company objectives, and so on and so forth. So it's always good to have some concreteness, but then of course uh, keep it open as well after certain weeks or months. That's important as well, so that you can always build the high level roadmaps for like 6 months or so, or 12 months. But when you are presenting it to anyone, just make sure that you mention that point. So ultimately, this should reflect short-term milestones that you want to achieve on a timescale, and you could use different methods, different styles of roadmaps based on which kind of projects you are doing. Kanban style is helpful for pipeline projects. We used once this Moscow method for time box projects, where you can just define what is must have, what it should have, could have, won't have. Helps with prioritization and also road mapping from that perspective. So yeah, that's it from my side. I have put some resources together, some links. I encourage you guys to look at it as well. I took some inspiration from different kind of articles and different kind of examples as well that are attached. And I will share this link presentation to the link to the presentation and in the meetup, so you can always refer to it when you are designing your team vision and strategy as well. That's it from my side. Thanks a lot. Hope you guys liked it. And if you have questions, I will check it out, and let's have a breakout session, I guess, afterwards to discuss and happy to get your feedback as well on this. Thank you.
And for people on Zoom right now, if you have questions, feel free to write them in the chat. And Rushil, once you share the link, maybe you can also share the link here, and I'll also post it on the YouTube stream, so people wouldn't need to click and go back to the meetup in case they're discovering this via YouTube. They could just access it from there. Thanks a lot. All right.
I just shared the link, and then you can post it as well on the video.
Yes, so I'm going to update the YouTube description. So guys, go ahead with your questions.
All right, we have a question in the chat. How often do you go through the process of vision definition? What are the triggers for that? Yeah, very good question. I think, as I said, like generally I would revisit the vision and strategy as a product manager and leader of the team every 3 months for sure, just by myself. But there could be definitely triggers in a way that if something drastically changing for your team, for your problem space, for your company and their objectives, then you should always revisit this. Every 6 months or 9 months, I would say you should revise it. Like you should revisit it. It doesn't mean that you have to do all the research and everything again. Of course not. You can just revise those sections that are really that need revision basically. And I think a couple of examples I could give is that we started like one of the problem spaces I own, like we started uh, with a very like legacy kind of services we own, and we really, it took us time to come up with proper vision and strategy. It took 4 revisions actually every uh, 4 months, I would say, to come up with a proper strategy that could survive longer than 1 year. Uh, so every 4 months, that was the trigger like I had in my calendar to revise the strategy again, get some alignments and go get some feedback and revise this again and again. So again, it depends. Like I would say, like it's a living dog, as I said, and triggers could be drastic change in your team's problem space, strategy, company's objectives, your business unit's objective is something that you could look into. And of course, every 4 to 6 months, you should always have a look into it to revise this. Next question is, would you create a vision or values set for the entire product team? How would this be approached, since every PM might have different products with different goals, users, etc.? Yeah, that's a good question. So this like team vision and strategy could well be taken as product vision and strategy as well. You can with some small tweaks you can convert into the product vision and strategy as well, where you would have a product vision, a mission to achieve that vision, the problem space and scoping of the product as well, and the values, like core values. In that sense, you can replace like them with the value proposition that your product should provide, and then ultimately goals and KPIs that you want to achieve. So it depends like how your organization is driven, in the sense that if you as a product person just drives different kind of products within with different goals and target users, etc. You could focus more on the product vision and strategy rather than the team vision and strategy. I think I wanted to touch more upon team vision and strategy, since I believe that every product person has to, of course, motivate and inspire the team as well. So with some small tweaks, you can flip from team vision to product vision and vice versa as well. Any tips on how to secure time and bandwidth within the team for this kind of exercises in a running business with ongoing customer requests, projects, new opportunities, firefighting, etc.? As I said, if you really ask the team that this is what is needed for the team, they will always agree with you. Like, believe me, like if you explain them with a proper reasoning and everything. And how to secure time and bandwidth, always go for offsite. This is my recommendation, like from my experience as well. You can really not work on this kind of topics in the same setting or environment that you are working in on a daily basis. I know it's quite difficult in this kind of situations, what we are in, but in this case, you could always have online offsite as well. There are some articles as well online, you can find it. That would mean that you disconnect your team from daily business. You announce it very clearly to your teams and stakeholders as well that you are on offsite. Book your calendar and then work on this in a very focused way. Of course, you basically need to have this exercise only to gather their input and feedback and have a brainstorming with them. So once you have that, you can come back as a product person or as a team lead. You can just write those things down in a proper way and then share, have another session with them to share what you have written, get their feedback, and so on and so forth. But I would again suggest have a very focused session with them and secure the time in a way that you are not doing anything else, but only this. It doesn't need a lot of time, like offsite, like half a day offsite even suffice in the beginning. And then once you really want to have a proper proper strategy review and everything, you can do it in a session or have longer offsite as well. Do you have model to follow up on measurement of KPI, KRI, KCI? If yes, which one? As I said, like I think in Klarna, we don't follow OKRs or anything, but we have KPIs which are attached to the goals or milestones that we want to achieve for the strategy. We generally create dashboards. It's very, very helpful. I'm not sure if I got the question right. If that's what you are asking, maybe you can clarify online. But ultimately, I would suggest that KPIs and the targets that you have decided, uh, you can break it down into, let's say, if you have a KPI for 3 months, you can break it down into weekly measurements if you want, or monthly measurements. And then dashboards can really help you see the progress. Because progress is something very important with the KPIs. I mean, that's, I said, like time-framed KPIs are very important. And in that sense, if you have an eye every day on the KPIs, how it's progressing, and if you have to change your strategy, if you have to do anything extra to achieve those KPIs, it's always helpful to have a look at it from almost like a daily basis, I would say. So that's something I could recommend. I hope I answer your question. Manuela, do you take external support, moderation, facilitation, research, etc. for that process? Why yes? Why? It depends, of course. I think if the problem space is more towards consumer and highly user research oriented, and if we don't have a competence, then of course we would take external support for that matter to understand, to clearly understand our users, and to, of course, identify their problems with proper user research and everything very clearly. So yes, in that sense, we do take moderation, facilitation, etc. But generally, like those kind of support you can also find within the company. And if there are budget restrictions, you can always learn and do it yourself. But yeah, I would suggest, like, if you really want to have a great and successful strategy, and if you don't have a competence, please ask for external support. It's always worth having that, and because that forms the basis. A lot of times, this kind of research that you need to do to build the vision and strategy, the competence and the expertise makes a lot of difference, actually, in that sense. Okay, can take one more question. How this process of team vision works in a larger companies with 20+ teams, in cases when multiple teams work on the same product? Yeah, I think that's exactly, I was touching on why this is important in such companies. But how this process works is that each team, like I'm talking from Klarna and also from Zalando's experience that I have, each team develops their vision and strategy. It works differently. For example, in Klarna, as I said in the beginning, that our teams have a lot of autonomy. They are like, we drive our teams like a small startup, so we have a lot of autonomy in a way to set the vision and the problem space as well. But of course, we need to align with other teams, with our domains and leadership as well. So it always comes handy with the alignment of this. So we generally work on the draft of the vision strategy, have alignment, gather feedback from different stakeholders and other teams. Of course, you always have to get the input from the discussions, from the meetings, from the collaborations you are having on a daily basis with the other teams as well. So you don't have to write everything, or you don't have to do everything from scratch. You always have this kind of information and experiences available. So you can start with that. Every team does this exercise, and then they come together on different levels to align, especially their problem spaces and scope. And from that sense, like you can always form a more concrete vision as well. Different kind of departments or like business units also come together to do the same exercise, and even leadership. For example, we have reviews every 2 weeks, and sometimes like different people. We invite different people to attend our reviews when we are reviewing this the version of strategy and vision, and then we would get feedback since they are aligning with other departments or business units as well. They would get we would get really good input. Of course, for the product, like when this setup is not there in a company where teams are working more on the product vision and strategy, it's always important to have clarity on the scope of the problem space. I mentioned this as well in the presentation, that scope is very, very important. So when you define your problem space, always make sure that you define what is in scope, what is out of scope for a particular team that is working on a set of features for the product. And then set the goals and KPIs based on that problem space and the scope that you have. This exercise is like helpful in a way that when multiple teams are working on the same kind of objective or same product, you really want to do this exercise and alignment with other teams to make sure that you are not wasting your resources doing the same thing or building the same thing, basically. Great. I think we have all the questions here, hopefully.
Yes.
But of course, if you have more questions, please please post it and meet up, and I'll try to answer it. But yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for listening to me, and I will definitely post the link. I think Mirella already did to YouTube.
Yes. I've updated the YouTube video and also fetched some of the links from the last slide so that they're directly clickable. You know what? I'm going to post them here, and then we're going to stop live streaming and have the informal part of this meetup where we just chat together for a little bit. So thanks everyone who's been watching so far on YouTube, and I'm going to stop streaming right now and see you in 2 weeks.